everyone, my name is Cindy Brissett and my presentation is on Death Valley National Park. It is the largest national park outside of Alaska and attracts hikers and campers from all over the world each year to explore the widely diverse landscape and natural formations. The park received its ominous name from a small group of settlers and miners who entered during the gold rush of 1849 to find it a daunting foe. As we begin to investigate this national wonder, let's start with a riddle. What do Star Wars and Jonathan Livingston Seagull have in common? The answer? Each of these movies, along with dozens of others, had scenes filmed in Death Valley National Park. Let's take a quick look through the lens. Because of its formidable topography, Death Valley National Park was used to portray the desolate landscape of the planet Tatooine. This, of course, was in Star Wars: A New Hope. They also returned in Return of the Jedi because it would seem that there wasn't any elephants available anywhere else in the world that they could use other than in California. So they also came back in order to film this elephant. Spoiler alert. Jonathan Livingston Seagull is a movie from 1973. This was a parable for life involving a seagull. I know it sounds weird, but the Vietnam War was winding down and it was a pretty weird time. Hopefully we can get a bird's eye view of Death Valley National Park. With vistas of sweeping beauty yet uninhabitable planets, Death Valley National Park is a place of extremes. It's in California, runs along the Nevada border. As you can see from this topographical map, it includes many different areas and wide variables in land formations. It's also fairly close to Area 51, so if anyone's thinking of storming, you might want to stop by here for a visit. One of the extremes is Badwater Basin, which contains the lowest point in America at 282 feet below sea level. Yet, you'll see in the distance Telescope Peak at a height of over 11,000 feet. There are also some interesting formations at the bottom of the basin, such as these salt flats, which have dried to form these odd shapes. This is called the Devil's Golf Course, and it was shaped by salt deposits. Rainwater or runoff from surrounding mountains collects in this area during the rainy season. As the water evaporates, the dirt and clay are left with coating of salt, leaving these dirty, crusty pinnacles. Another characteristic of the park's extreme nature is the scorching temperatures, which holds the record for the highest recorded temperature on the surface of the Earth at a squelching 134 degrees Fahrenheit. In addition to being North America's lowest spot and its hottest spot, it's also North America's driest spot, with an average rainfall of only just over 2 inches. As you can guess with these extremes such as these, the Death Valley has a long and rich geological history. If you took all the different formation terms, which we have learned in the last 6 weeks during this class, shook them all up in a bag and rolled them all out into one place, you would have Death Valley National Park. Obviously, with such a lengthy history, I can't get into all of them during a 10-minute presentation, so I'll try to hit a couple of the highlights. First of all, Death Valley is actually a graben, as it lies between two faults, and very little is known about the oldest exposed rock. Due to excessive heat and pressure, the rock has been changed dramatically and is now metamorphic. Because of this progression to schist and gneiss, the original type of rock is no longer recognizable. However, mineral deposits, including limestone and sandstone in several areas, indicate that the valley was once the site of a shallow sea. Wikipedia's article on Death Valley reiterates that the park has a diverse and complex geologic history. Since its formation, the area that comprises the park has experienced at least 4 major periods of extensive volcanism, 3 or 4 periods of major sedimentation, and several intervals of major tectonic deformation where the crust has been reshaped. 2 periods of glaciation, a series of ice ages, have also had effects on the area, although no glaciers ever existed in the ranges, now in park. Although we can't know what the original rock looked like, there is evidence to suggest that the area we now call Death Valley was at one time at the edge of the ocean. At that time, the Pacific Plate began to slide under the North American Plate, which we know to be subduction, to form a new landscape. When the Pacific Plate reached its boiling point, it melted, created pressure, and escaped up through the Earth's crust to form a chain of volcanoes. This volcanic activity continued for millions of years, constantly changing the landscape. At some point after that time, the tectonic plates began to shift away from each other, and as a result of this extension, the region began to shift and pull away, forming the valley that we see today. Some of the more beautiful aspects of the things that we can see at Death Valley are these alluvial fans that have formed at the mouths of several canyons due to the sedimentation material running off. In another area, steeply tilted limestone forms the Striped Butte. Artist's Palette has been formed by volcanic deposits. In spite of these highs and lows in temperatures and in water, over 1 million visitors return annually to the Death Valley National Park in order to enjoy all that this region has to offer. Despite the extreme conditions in Death Valley National Park, it does have some wildlife which have adapted to the rugged terrain. Some of these are not terribly unexpected, like coyotes, bighorn sheep, foxes. However, there are some species which are not quite as common. There is a spider on the next page for those of you with phobias. One thing that we see a lot in this region is desert tarantulas. Also, on the other hand, we see this beautiful Death Valley roadrunner. There are several known pupfish species in the Death Valley region. However, the rarest is the Devil's Hole pupfish, which has been protected since 1967 when it was declared an endangered species. Unfortunately, in spite of protection efforts, numbers have steadily been declining. As of spring 2016, only 115 were counted. Although scientists have been working steadily to save this small species of fish, they are unable to determine why they are still in decline. But what about people? Who would be brave enough to traverse this harsh environment? Although tribes of Native Americans are known to have lived here at one time, the last known tribe were the Tembisha, the Shoshone. They were miners who gave the valley its moniker back in the 1850s, and there were some small mining camps in the 19th and 20th centuries, although the only thing that has been mined in recent years is borax. There are still people who brave this inhospitable habitat, some working for the tourist industry and some who've left the hustle and bustle of the city to embrace the solitude of the desert. These folks count themselves as lucky. Charles Draggs explained to the LA Times why he left his job as an IRS tax examiner to live there a few years ago. It's fantastic living in the desert, says Draggs, 53. It changes daily. Actually, it changes 3 or 4 times a day, depending mostly on where the sun is. Well, if we've learned anything from the geologic history of Death Valley National Park, it's that it's ever-changing and will continue to change in the future. The constant movement of the plates and the resulting process happening to the region, along with evidence of volcanic activity deep below the surface, the only thing that we know for sure about the future is that it will probably look very different from the present. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation, and I hope that you've been able to see some of the real beauty and some of the real changes that have happened over time within this region. I've really learned a lot, and I hope everyone else has too. Thank you.